On a chilly winter's night, nestled by a cozy fireside, sat Mrs. Bramble and her hefty black cat, Midnight, both lulled into a drowsy state. They were patiently awaiting Mr. Bramble's return from his day's work. Time ticked slowly by, and just as they were about to give up waiting, Mr. Bramble burst through the door, his eyes wide with astonishment, exclaiming, "Who in the world is King Whisker?" Startled, Mrs. Bramble and Midnight turned their attention to him, curiosity sparked by his unusual demeanor. "My dear, what has gotten into you?" inquired Mrs. Bramble, puzzled by her husband's frantic appearance and strange question. "Oh, you won't believe what happened." Mr. Bramble gasped for air as he spoke. "There I was, tending to old Mr. Greenway's resting place, when suddenly I dozed off. I was jolted awake not by the cold, but by the eeriest meow I've ever heard." "Meow," Midnight responded, as if part of their conversation. "Exactly that," Mr. Bramble pointed excitedly, as I peered over the grave's edge. "Guess what I saw?" Mrs. Bramble, always a mix of skepticism and amusement when it came to her husband's tales, urged him to continue. 9 black cats, mirror images of Midnight here, except each bore a white mark upon their chest. They were parading solemnly, carrying a tiny coffin draped in black velvet with a small golden crown atop it. And every few steps they would pause to meow in unison. "Meow," Midnight echoed once more, his timing impeccable. "Just so," Mr. Bramble affirmed. As they drew closer, their eyes gleamed with a mystical green light, guiding them through the darkness. They moved with such purpose directly towards me, their procession solemn and strange. "And Midnight, he seems almost too interested in your story," Mrs. Bramble noted, watching their cat's unusual fixation on the tail. "Indeed," Mr. Bramble nodded, "but let me finish. These cats, with their eerie green eyes, stopped right by Mr. Greenway's grave, facing me. The air grew cold, and I was rooted to the spot. And then the leader of the cats, not burdened by the coffin, stepped forward. He looked me straight in the eye and spoke in a squeaky voice. 'Tell King Whisker that Lord Purrington has passed.' And that, my dear, is why I had to ask about King Whisker. How can I deliver the message if I don't know who he is?" But Mrs. Bramble's attention had shifted entirely to Midnight, who had begun to swell in size, his eyes wide with a newfound realization. "Look! Look at Midnight!" she cried out. For in that moment, Midnight transformed. No longer just their hefty black cat, he announced in a voice that filled the room, "What? Lord Purrington is no more? Then behold, for I am King Whisker." With that declaration, Midnight, or King Whisker as he was now known, darted up the chimney and into the night, leaving behind a stunned Mr. and Mrs. Bramble. From that day forward, he was never seen again, his legend living on as the King of the Cats.